Rebel Without a Cause is the 1955 classic starring James Dean. It is directed by Nicholas Ray, and it is one of the most iconic teen movies ever made. We're going to get into it on the Golden Era Film Podcast as part of our Golden Era Film Podcast Through the Years arc. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Golden Hour Film Podcast. I am, of course, joined by my co-host, not guest host, Shane Mulvaney. Shane, how are you?
Good, how are you? Looking forward to getting into this classic, this very first ever James Dean film on the podcast. First Nicholas Ray film on the podcast as well. And that's another one that I want to get into as well. So yeah, should be interesting.
Yeah, definitely. Not our first Natalie Wood film, though. Obviously, she was the child in Miracle on 34th Street.
Miracle on 34th Street. Yeah.
But yeah. Rebel Without a Cause, for me, anyway, is... I think this is going to be like one of the most that we differ on opinion on the film. For me, this is like one of the greatest teen movies ever made. I think it's so ahead of its time as far as how it portrays like teenage angst and melodrama, and how like what happens in your teenage years feels like the most important stuff in the world, when it actually... maybe it's not as serious. Although, that being said, this film gets pretty serious too. Pretty serious. James Dean, yeah, what an icon. I had also... this isn't my first time seeing this, but the first time I saw Rebel Without a Cause, it was also my first James Dean film, and I feel like it's most people's first James Dean film.
Yeah, it's the first time I've seen it. I haven't seen Giant, and I was going to watch East of Eden, but then they announced that Florence Pugh, actually Zoe Kazan, who's the granddaughter of Elia Kazan, who made East of Eden back in the 50s. She's made her own. She's kind of written her own TV show for Netflix. So I was like, right, I'll hold off till closer to the time. That way I can like get into it at that point, so I won't forget too much about it. But so yeah, this is my first James Dean film. My third Nicholas Ray film I've seen, In a Lonely Place, which I can't praise enough. That is one of my favourite noirs of all time. Humphrey Bogart is amazing in that film. Gloria Graham's great in the film as well, but it's all about like the film definitely does draw parallels with Nicholas Ray's real life marriage at the time. So really interesting backstory to get into if you watch that film, because definitely draws heavily in his real life marriage at the time. And also They Live by Night, which is Farley Granger, our boy Farley Granger from Rope. He's in that, and again that's a film which it's not a teen film, but he's a very young adult in that film. He's been in jail for quite a few years since he was a kid, since he was like a young man, and he escapes prison with two other guys. I won't mention who or how, but that film does also deal with kind of young love in a way, even though they're both kind of just young adults, they're not kids, but it deals with that, I think, in maybe a more nuanced way, slightly more well handled way than maybe. This is probably a controversial opinion because I know this film is considered a classic, and I did enjoy it, but I do think They Live by Night kind of deals with similar themes in a more nuanced way. But anyway, broadly speaking, yeah, I did like this film, and it's another W in the column for Nicholas Ray as well.
Yeah, it stars James Dean, who obviously passed away, unfortunately young, in
1 month before this film came out.
In his Porsche Spider. Natalie Wood, as we've already talked about from Miracle on 34th Street, also died very young, in her early 40s in a mysterious drowning incident. And Sal Mineo,
I think it's Mineo,
the other star of this film, also died very young. He was murdered by a guy who had like 12 robberies to his name and still only got 12 years.
Yeah,
prison.
It's crazy.
Do your job. Like, that makes no sense. Anyway, also it's the film debut of Dennis Hopper. What a guy. Love Dennis Hopper. Such a class actor. Such an underrated actor.
Yeah, I like everything I've seen Dennis Hopper in. But yeah, I think the fact that, like, I think a lot of the teen angst stuff works really well. But no, there's no doubting whatsoever that I think the fact that the three main characters all died like very young, untimely deaths, and in a couple of cases mysterious deaths. Well, in one case mysterious death. there's just like a poignancy throughout the film. It's like these characters are all worried that they're not going to live up to their potential, and they're worried that their kind of lives aren't going to turn out the way they want. Their lives aren't going to turn out the way they want to, and it's hard not to draw parallels with how we know their lives ended. So it's like there was like a really kind of poignant, sad, somber tone that I was watching this film through, even though it's actually not like I don't love it as much as everyone else does, and we'll get into the reasons why. But that stuff that it did really kind of strike on my heartstrings, pull on my heartstrings, because it's like all that talent just gone way too soon.
Yeah, I mean, just before this, Dean was nominated for the Academy Award for East of Eden, and with this film, both Sal Mineo and Natalie Wood were both nominated for Academy Awards for their performances as well. So, yeah, it's more than a shame. It's terrible, but at least in fairness to her, Natalie Wood did manage to put together an incredibly respectable career after this. Like, even though she died at a young age, she has some resume.
She also,
this is obviously. Go ahead, sorry.
Sorry, I was just going to say, like, she had a very hard life. Leaving aside the circumstances around her death, which, again, people can check out, there's other stuff that would appear... She went through other stuff in her life that, like, it really, like, no one should ever have to go through. And it just... If anyone wants to talk about, like, Hollywood's darker side, there's not too many people that can say that they've kind of suffered because of Hollywood as much as Natalie Wood. So it's like... She was just she went through a really hard time because of the industry she was in and where she lived, and it's just it wasn't fair to her at all.
Yeah, and I reckon will we get on into it?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, cool. So Jim, the character of James Dean, gets arrested for being drunk and disorderly. We find him lying on a pavement, and he finds a little monkey toy with symbols. It's great. And yeah, he gets brought into the police station, where we also see Plato, who is Sal Mineo's character, and we see Judy, who is Natalie Wood's character. We don't really see much of them just yet, but when Jim gets brought in, then Judy, we go into her room, where she's basically telling this cop, Ray, that her father called her a dirty tramp and said stuff about her, rubbed her makeup off her face and everything. Basically, 1950s teen angst in a nutshell there for young girls, I feel. A very overbearing father who is a bit of an arsehole, it's safe to say. And yeah, she's devastated, but yeah, she's obviously kind of used to it, so she's like, fine, yeah, he can pick me up, I'll get off your case. And Ray's like, right, okay, I'll call your father. In the meantime, then John is like shivering, so Jim offers him his jacket, and John is there with his maid, I suppose.
Yeah.
And the maid's like, yeah, no, he's been shivering all day, but for some reason John doesn't want the jacket. John is Pluto, it's his real name, but I'll probably just go back and forth between the two names, to be honest. And Judy's mother turns up instead of her father to pick her up, to Judy's dismay. I think she was obviously trying to prove a point to her father, but instead the mother came and picked her up instead. And Jim is just absolutely schmammered in the police station. He's just like making siren noises and stuff, trying to wind the guys up. Whilst John then gets brought in for murdering puppies. Fucking forgot about that detail.
I know.
I forgot about that detail. I forgot about that.
Yeah.
I was like, whoa, fucking hell, Pluto. I did not remember that.
Plato.
Oh, Plato. Sorry, not Pluto. He was a dog. He probably got shot by Plato.
Exactly. That was... You can't expect me to root for someone who kills defenseless puppies. Come on, man. Like, I'm sorry, I don't care what Plato's going through. I'm sorry for, like... But come on, you kill puppies, I don't root for you. I'm sorry. That's one issue. Yeah. That's one issue with the film. I couldn't recover from that. I'm sorry. Like everything
for me, it's the one thing where I was like, all right, I get that we're meant to show that Plato is like a kid who's very troubled because of like trauma, but like,
come on, there's a lot
killing puppies, Nicholas Ray. Could you not have thought of something a bit more human?
Come on.
Than killing Anyway, we learned that neither of John's parents are on the scene, and basically this maid is raising him.
Yeah.
They're still alive. They just seem to not parent him or
Yeah.
do anything for him. Speaking of parents, Jim's parents have shown up, and yeah, the dynamic of basically his father lets everyone walk all over him, and he's trying to like be Jim's friend and be all cool,
Yeah.
whereas the mother just cuts him off and makes him feel like an idiot all the time, and Jim's dad just accepts it. That happens, and Jim gets then brought in for questioning with his parents by Ray, and yeah, Ray's kind of asking him what is this with you, kid? I've never met you before or whatever. And the dad's like, oh yeah, we just moved here. And Jim's like, yeah, tell him why we moved here. And straight away then the parents start bickering, and that happens quite a lot of times in the film, where you can tell in order to get a point across, Jim pushes the buttons of one of his parents to try and get the other one to react, to see like basically how they react. And yeah, do they react? They start bickering and shouting basically in front of both Jim and Ray, and then we get the iconic "You're tearing me apart" line from James Dean, which you could argue has been ruined by Tommy Wiseau, but yeah, it's the first thing that I think of. Unfortunately, it's such great acting, but all I think about is Tommy Wiseau now with the "You're tearing me apart" line.
I don't know. I think it's slightly overplayed. That might be controversial again for some people. Like maybe this is again just why I like the film, but like I just wasn't blown away by it as much as other people. But it's like it's good acting, but it's also a bit overplayed. I don't know.
Yeah, but I think that's the point, because
Yeah,
he's meant to be a teenager and
true.
everything's like he's
that's
basically having a temper tantrum almost, like he's meant
That's
to be
true.
sort of adolescent.
Yeah, that's right. And there is one moment at the very end of the film, which deserves all the plaudits he gets for that. So we'll come on to
Yeah, it's my favorite line in the whole film.
yeah.
But yeah, he actually finds the little makeup mirror, the little pocket mirror that Judy had just left behind, so he slips that into his pocket, and Ray pulls him into the other room then, because he can't seem to get a word in, because Jim's ma just keeps talking over everyone, and he's basically like, what are you doing? Like, what is it with you? What's your story? And Jim just lunges at him, tries to hit him, and Ray puts him on his ass. And Ray's like, right, okay, so you're trying to get yourself arrested. You want to be in juvie. That's what this is. You're trying to get yourself into trouble. He's like, if you have anger issues, just take it out on the desk. And he starts like going at it with the desk or whatever. And Ray's like, right, you got that out of your system. Now just tell me your story, man. What's up with you? And yeah, Jim basically says what I've already said. His dad's a pushover who tries to be his friend. He likes his dad, but he doesn't want to be anything like his dad. And this is a good thing to know for later as well. Basically, his whole thing is like, how is he supposed to grow up with two parents who he wants to be the total opposite of when he does grow up? Like, how does he, what shapes him? And the only thing that seems to be shaping him is the mistakes that he's making. So Ray's basically, right, listen, if you ever need someone to talk to, just come back up to the station. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, I like how the cop Ray plays this, because he's not trying to be like, obviously people can look at cops like, and that's a whole thing, but he's not playing it like a cop. He's playing it like a counselor almost. He's playing it like he's trying to counsel him through this. So that's interesting, because obviously he's dealing with a kid after all. You can't expect him to, a teenager. You can't expect him to have like his emotions fully formed and fully in control the way maybe he would expect an adult to. So I like that kind of dynamic that we see in this scene that doesn't really pop up throughout the film, maybe at the very end, but I like the fact that, again, at least Jim finally has someone who actually kind of wants to understand him, even if he doesn't fully understand him. But yeah, like Ray's like, right, next time you feel like that, just unload. Don't take it out on a person. Just unload on something. So he starts wailing on a desk, and he does feel better after it, in fairness. I think it's fair to say.
Yeah. And he says as well that the reason that he got into a fight earlier in the night as well, because the guy called him chicken, which back in the 50s was about as bad as insults got.
I think, yeah, well, the word chicken will obviously come up a bit later, but yeah, then he mentions the fact that they keep moving, so he just keeps moving. His parents keep moving him around because they think, right, maybe he'll make friends in this new place. And he's like, well, they don't realise that's the problem. Like, I can't stay in any place long enough to, like, build a connection with anyone. So,
yeah,
what am I supposed to do here?
Yeah.
that's Nicholas Ray's way of telling us, okay, he's into Judy.
Yeah, and he goes out to her and he asks her where the school is, and she's like, "Oh, are you gonna walk with me? Are you gonna carry my books?" And he's like, "Oh, no, just hop into my car." And then she was like, "Nah, if I'm getting in the car, I'm getting in it with the lads." Because then the lads show up, including Dennis Hopper. And yeah, Buzz is the leader of the lads. And when Jim then asks them for the directions, they all are just assholes to him, basically. They are a bunch of assholes. Jim gets to the school then. Eventually, he does find it. And when he walks in, he steps on the school insignia, which like pisses this one guy off so much. It's so funny.
He did a Jude
He's like, "Hey,
Bellingham.
what are you doing?"
This is just like Jude Bellingham, like not wanting to step on the Real Madrid insignia. It's
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
footballers
Yeah,
do this
real
all the
Ferdinand
time
as
now.
well.
Yeah. It's like, who cares?
Yeah, exactly.
I hate
Who
when
fucking gives a
footballers do
shit?
this. Who
Yeah,
cares? I'm sorry.
it makes no sense to me either. But yeah, this guy loses his shit, and he's like, "Bro, that's the school insignia you're stepping on. Who do you think you are?" And he's like, I'm new here. I didn't know you like
Cared
didn't know
about
that was a
that.
thing."
Exactly. I didn't know
Totally
you were.
normal response. He's like, I just didn't know that was a thing. Sorry, man. He's like, "But it's a school insignia, bro." I was like, "Oh, shut up." And he tells him, "Oh, if you're looking for anything, go to room 208, I think it is." And he's like, "Oh, okay, thanks." And as he's going in, he just gets dirty looks from all of Judy's friends again, Buzz and the lads. He goes into the corridor and he's wandering around aimlessly. He can't seem to find anything. But John or Plato does spot him. The one thing he does find though is a sign that says that there's a school trip to the planetarium. So he heads off to the planetarium later on in the school day in his own car. He doesn't get the bus. And yeah, in the planetarium, they all kind of start making jokes. Like Buzz makes a joke, everyone laughs. Buzz's friend makes a joke, everyone laughs. And then Jim makes a joke, and everyone goes dead silent. And they turn around and they're all like, "Who the fuck is this comedian?"
Yeah.
Basically just being dickheads to him.
They're
And
the only ones allowed to
Plato
make a joke.
explains to him they're a bunch of assholes. Judy's an asshole and Buzz is an asshole, and they make it impossible for people to make friends in this place. So just stay the fuck away from them. They're assholes. And then they all start calling him Moo as well, because he tried to make a joke. Like, they were all making star sign jokes, and then he mooed during the tourist one, so they just start calling him Moo.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
after
then
the,
in this, sorry, go ahead.
so after the planetarium, Jim's outside and he overhears Buzz and the gang talking about getting back at this new guy. So they wait by his car, and he walks over towards where Plato is, and they can he's looking at them and they're looking at him, and because he's not coming down quickly enough for them, Buzz just takes out a pocket knife and he walks over to his car and he starts slashing his tire, and Jim just walks out calmly, doesn't say a word, opens the trunk, takes out a spare tire, and he tries to change the tire, but then they start clucking at him like a chicken, which we've established he is not too pleased about. He does not like when people call him chicken.
Yes, it pisses him right the fuck off.
So he just flips the switch like that, and he's not happy whatsoever. He gets really angry, and then Buzz pulls out the knife, and he's like, tells one of his mates, he's like, "Give him a knife," and the mate's like, "What?" He's like, "Give him a knife," I said. So his mate throws him a knife, and then we get a fade route to Paul Atreides scene from
literally. Yeah, they have a knife fight, but they establish the rules.
Yeah.
No shticking. You can slash, no shticking.
Yeah.
And they're at first as well. Jim's like, I don't want trouble, but he's smart enough to like he keeps moving the knife wherever he's going, but he doesn't actually flip it, but he just keeps it on him just in case. And he's like, I don't want trouble. And then the guy like turns his back and turns back again, so Jim just grabs a knife, flicks it open, and then slashes at him and gets him in the stomach. And then they kind of go back and forth over and over again, just slashing each other, missing each other, slashing each other, missing each other, until Buzz manages to get like one or two in on him, like some pretty deep cuts where like you can see there's blood on his shirt, and the security guard catches wind of this because he can kind of hear all the commotion outside, and he goes to get the professor, and he's like, guys, what do we do? What do we do? And the professor's like, I think it's better sort itself out because, yeah, we look back and Jim just disarms Buzz, sends his knife flying, grabs him by the throat, takes the knife, pushes him against the edge of the
cliff.
like it's
it's like a wall.
Drop. It just holds him over it, puts the knife against his throat, and he just says, have you had enough? It's like, oh.
It's shot really well. Really well.
This is the first day of school equivalent to when you're in prison and you have to find the biggest guy and beat him up on the first day. He takes the school bully, holds a knife to him, and holds him over a cliff basically. And he's like, yeah, I've had enough. But Buzz can't let his pride be diminished. So he says, well, you know, if you're not a chicken, I'll see you at 8 o'clock. And he's not asking him out on a date. But what he is asking him to do is to play Chicken Run at this old, I think they call it like Old Bluffs Canyon or something. Yeah. It's essentially just this big old cliff. Yeah. And they have to do a thing called a chicken run, which we will establish what that is when we get to it. But everybody goes back home. And Jim first gets home to find his dad.
Sorry, I took cut across you as well. I like how they're like, you know what a chicken run is, don't you? And Jim's like, of course I know what a chicken run is. And then they all leave and he goes to play up. So what's a chicken run?
He's like, what is a chicken run? What have I set myself up for? But Jim gets home and he finds his dad. I would say especially in the 50s, this would like really hit home. But he gets home to see his dad in a frilly pink and yellow apron on his hands and knees scrubbing the carpet because he's just cooked the mom supper and then he tripped and fell and spilled the tray all over the carpet and he's on his hands and knees scrubbing it. And Jim's like, oh, you just dropped it? That's kind of hilarious actually. He's kind of chuckling to himself and then he's like, wait, let her see it. And the dad's like, no, I couldn't let her see it. And he's like, well, what's gonna happen if you do let her see it? Like, it's not a big deal. It shouldn't be a big deal. You dropped it, like it was an accident. And the dad gets all defensive, and that pisses Jim off because ultimately, Jim in this film, he doesn't realize it yet, but he's desperately looking for someone to look up to. Now, interestingly enough, and I think where this film gets really good, and especially there's a scene later, is the fact that Plato actually looks up to Jim whilst Jim is trying to find someone to look up to, and he tries to find that with Ray, but he doesn't really get it. But he's just he wants to look up to his dad, but his dad keeps basically letting his mom walk all over him and letting Jim down as well, because after Judy gets home and her father refuses to kiss her and then strikes her, so she storms right back out of the house. Jim asks his dad that if honor was on the line, and it was really dangerous, but if your honor is on the line, would you do the really dangerous thing to make sure that people still respected you? And the dad was like, oh, I can't give you an answer straight away, but we can really sit down and think about this. And he goes to flick the light on to grab a pen and paper, and when he flicks the light on, he sees the bloody shirt and the stab wounds and everything. He's like, oh my god, what's happened? And he's like, Dad, I just need an answer. Like, would you do it? Or like this real dangerous thing, it's really important to me to know, like, should I do this? And the dad's like, well, like, I just can't give you an answer just yet. Why don't maybe we'll get someone else's opinion? Or he also says, like, oh, listen, even if you make the wrong decision, in 10 years' time, you'll forget it.
He tries to play it down, which is the worst thing.
That pisses Jim off so much.
Yeah, his dad's like, you won't remember it. It'll just be like a laugh to you. You'll be looking back at it thinking, oh, why was I so upset? And then obviously Jim, because no one's listening to him, no one understands him, it makes him feel even worse.
Yeah. And he snaps because he's like, 10 years, you're expecting me to wait 10 years before I feel better about this situation. So he storms out, and the mom gives out to the dad for letting Jim storm out as well.
And he storms out in the iconic, what's now known as the iconic.
Oh, it's so
James
iconic.
Dean look, the white t-shirt and the red leather jacket.
Yeah, and the blue jeans as well.
Blue jeans, yeah.
Yeah, so they go to the top of this Bluffs Creek or Bluffs Canyon, and it's a game of Chicken Run. Shane, what's Chicken Run?
So Chicken Run is two guys or two women, whoever, two people are in a car each, and they're driving a car as fast as they can on the count of go, and the count of three, 1, 2, 3, go, and they have to drive a car as close to the canyon as they can, jump out, and the person who jumps out first is a chicken, and the person who jumps out second is the winner. So theoretically, you could both drive right over that cliff.
Mm-hmm.
It's all about timing it so that you're not the chicken without killing yourself, essentially.
Yeah. And then we get one of my favorite little interactions in the entire film, which is when Jim is finding out what a chicken run is. Him and Buzz are actually like quite cordial with each other. They're quite nice to each other. Because they clearly both respect each other, because neither of them have backed out of this chicken run.
I think Buzz actually says to him, like, I actually like you. Like, I actually...
That's it. Yeah.
I actually like you.
So he was like, I actually like you. And Jim goes, but then why are
we doing this?
Because you have to do something, don't you?
Yeah.
Basically, it's like there's nothing else for these kids to do.
I think the two scenes...
They both put their pride on the line.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
that's it.
It's such a... Especially with like what happens later in the film, it's such a great scene.
The two scenes with Buzz and Jim, so the fight scene from earlier, the knife fight scene, and then this scene, are to me the best two scenes in the film by a mile. I suppose the last scene, I'll come to the last scene, but those two scenes in particular. Also, like, this is going to be a really weird comparison, and I can understand if people want to hate me in the comments for this. This scene gave me, and I don't want to be that guy who's like Boss Baby vibes, right? This guy who's seen the Boss Baby. But also this scene, and I don't know if this scene came up before the movie, but to mention, but this scene reminded me a bit of Karate Kid, where it's like two guys, maybe it's because I'm a Cobra Kai fan, I like the Cobra Kai TV series, where it's like, right, we know Daniel and the other guy, Daniel and Johnny are now kind of friends in that show. But it's like, right, in the original Karate Kid, it's like, they just could have been friends, but because neither of them wants to back down, and obviously, well, Daniel's getting bullied. But you know what I'm saying here. That's obviously a much lighter tone film. But Daniel also feels like he's the new kid in town, similar to Jim. He feels like he has no friends, essentially, and he just feels like he's bullied and he's no way out. So it's kind of similar vibes. And also, we know now that that Johnny was kind of being manipulated by so he's not necessarily a bad guy, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, exactly.
So you could easily see a scenario where Daniel and Johnny at the time
I think
were
it's
friends.
a fair comparison.
So I just don't hate me in the comments. I get that they're completely different films, but I can also see how Karate Kid may have been inspired by elements of Rebel Without a Cause. That's all I'm saying. Yeah.
And Buzz gets Judy to give him like a handful of dirt as like a good luck thing. And so Jim calls her over and asks her to do the same thing as well. Just beforehand, Pluto, keep calling him Pluto because I'm thinking of dogs. Plato and Judy were talking, and she's like, "Oh, tell me about your friend Jim." And like they'd only just met that day, but obviously because Plato just instantly idolizes him, is like, he's my best friend. He's like the most sincere person you'll ever meet. He's one of a kind. So she's obviously somewhat interested in him too. That's not to say that she's not interested in Buzz as well, but she's clearly got some sort of an interest now in him too.
I love how I love how Plato says as well, when he speaks you listen. So it's like he's already positioning Jim as this like kind of like wise old soul who has a kind of old head on young shoulders, so to speak.
Yeah. And so Judy is to Fast and Furious signal so that the two cars can go past her, and then they go towards the cliff, and she does so. And what we don't realize at the time is that Buzz actually caught his sleeve in the door handle. So as the two of them are flying towards this cliff, they're kind of looking over each other, and then Buzz looks down, and Buzz is ready to grab it, and then he can't get his arm out, and his arm's caught in the door handle, and his sleeve is like wrapped around his hand, and Jim's like, well, fuck this, man, and he bails just in time, and what he doesn't see is that Buzz goes straight off the cliff.
Yeah,
and the car explodes in a fireball, and everybody runs over to the cliff, and they're all in shock. And Jim just starts laughing. He's giggling to himself. And he's like, that was great fun. Where's Buzz? And one of the guys just goes, he's down there.
Down there, yeah. Yeah, it's really harrowing stuff. Like, I mean, yeah, it's heavy stuff. Obviously, everyone's distraught. So everyone gets the fuck out of Dodge. Everyone's like, we need to get the fuck out of here.
Yeah, Buzz's friends
Yeah, friends.
all are like, we need to get out of here, scram.
With Dennis
And it's
Hopper,
actually Jim, Plato, and Judy who stick around for a minute just to take the moment in, basically.
yeah. So Jim then gives Judy a ride home, and then he's dropping Plato home as well. Sorry, he's going to home with. He goes to his home, and Plato's like trying to see if Jim will allow him to maybe hang around a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And Jim's like, look, I need to just unwind, etc., etc. I need to just fucking put this past me. So what's he do?
Yeah.
He's like, okay, I'm just gonna take my address book out and take an out of your address.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which could be important information later.
Yeah, could be.
Yeah, because Plato originally wanted, he's like, look, my parents aren't home, just come to my house, have a sleepover. No, we can
It's
chill
worth mentioning as well, because he says it earlier, that Plato, whenever he's not home, he hangs around this like old abandoned mansion, and he's kind of like, oh, well, do you want to just come back there with me? We can just stay up and chat.
Yeah.
It's just like, oh, he clearly just wants someone to talk to as well.
Yeah, he clearly doesn't have
we're dealing
too
with
many
3
friends.
teenagers here whose parents are all basically neglecting them in one way or the other. Because when Judy goes in, her parents literally ignore her, even though she's coming in the middle of the night. They just pretend she's not even there, and they're talking to her brother, telling the brother to go to bed, but they ignore her. And when Jim goes in, he finds that his dad is asleep waiting for him to come home, and the mother comes down, and she's like, oh my god, where were you? What did you get up to, or whatever? And Jim's dad wakes up as well, and he's like, oh my god, like, did you see there was a crash? We were watching it on the TV. They showed pictures of it. Jim's like, yeah, guys, I have something to confess to you. And again, this scene is so good. It's so well played by James Dean. So basically, he wants to man up and confess to being a part of this. And he explains to his parents what happened. There was a game of chicken, and the other guy didn't get out of the car, and he died. And that's actually the incident that everybody on the TV is talking about. And he has information about that. He can identify the person who it is, and he wants to go to the police. But obviously, he has to suffer the repercussions as well. And straight away, the mom's like, well, why should you be the only one who goes forward? Like, how do you know anyone else is going forward? And he's like, well, it's got nothing to do with that. I think I need to go forward. Yeah, like, what do you think, Dad? And his dad's like, no, actually, I don't know. Well,
I think your mom's right.
I think you've already learnt your lesson. I think the fact that you want to go forward to the police, I think you've learnt your lesson already. And he's like, no, like, Dad, come on, like, fucking, I want you to stick up for me here and tell me that I need to go to the police. And the dad's like, well, no, I don't think that'll be wise. Why should you go to prison or whatever for making a mistake? It's just a mistake, and you've learnt your lesson already. And he's like, and then anytime the dad starts speaking, the mom starts cutting her off, and then James Dean's character Jim tries to get in, and then the mom cuts him off, and then he's trying to get his dad to stick up for him, and the dad just sits there silently, and he then is in between. The blocking's so clever because the mom is on the high ground, she's at the top of the stairs, Jim is in the middle, and then the dad is at the very foot of the stairs as well, and he's sat down like slunched over with no sort of confidence or anything, and they just get into this argument, and he's like, Dad, come on, I need something here. I need you to stick up for me, please. Like, I want you to tell me I'm right, that I need to go to the police. And he's just silent, and he just stays silent, and it just absolutely breaks his heart. So he just heads back out again. He's like, fuck this, and he goes straight to the police station anyway. And when he gets there, he sees all of Buzz's friends are hanging out there.
Well, he attacks his dad.
But they were actually...
Sorry,
say it again?
He does attack his father before he leaves. He kind of lunges at him.
Yes, he does attack his father. Yeah. He grabs his father at the bottom of the stairs. He throws him over the chair, and he holds him down by his neck, and then he storms out. Yeah. And he kicks a painting on the way out too.
Yeah, he goes to the police station, and he's like, I need to see Detective Ray, or whatever his name is, Detective Ray. Yeah. And they're like, they kind of ignore him, not even acknowledging he's there. And he's like, please, I need to see him. And they're like, he's gone for the night. He's not going to be back till the morning. Come back then. And so he's desperately trying to do the right thing. Meanwhile, Buzz's cronies have spotted him going inside. So obviously they put 2 and 2 together, and maybe they're not as dumb as they look, because they're like, he's got a rat. So they're pretty fucked over about that. So they're obviously trying to, for whatever reason, they don't want Buzz to actually get not justice, because it's not his fault, but they obviously don't want to be implicated as well, I guess.
Yeah,
So
because they were dealing with stolen cars and
yeah,
everything there. Like there
that's
was a load of stuff they were doing there which was illegal, so they don't want to go down for
yeah,
well, what happened. But yeah, basically these are the antagonists of the film, in case you haven't gathered.
yeah. So he then Jim then once he knows he's not going to get anywhere with seeing Detective Ray, he goes over to the payphone and he calls Judy, and her dad. Obviously, this is quite late at night, so her dad answers the phone and he's angry that he's answering the phone to another boy. So it's implied her dad has basically been slut shaming Judy for throughout
Yeah,
the film,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and he's pretty pissed off that it's another boy. So he's not the most progressive anyway, but he patched the call through, and then Judy picks up.
Yeah, no, so he heads over to her house anyway,
Yeah,
because, well, he heads over to her house anyway, but she's actually waiting outside because she does overhear the father say, Jim, Jim
yeah,
who? So she knows that Jim's on the way. So she waits outside for Jim, and when he gets there, actually on the car radio, the guy on the radio says,
yeah.
now, Jim, this is a song dedicated to you
From
from
Buzz.
Buzz. So it's just the lad they're trying to get into his head.
It's like a threat. Yeah,
And yeah, so he just switches that off, and he's talking away to her basically, and they basically both come to the conclusion that they want to run away from home. They're sick of their parents. They kiss,
I love how
and
as well. She calls him Jamie, which that's what Plato told him
yeah,
that he prefers
yeah,
to be called, and he's like, Jamie, what you talking about? Like, no,
yeah, yeah,
I think he just made that up, Plato. But anyway,
yeah. It's so good, but yeah. In the meantime, Plato is on his bike on the way home, and as he gets home, Buzz's mates all jump out from the bushes and attack him and beat him up, and they're asking him where Jim is because they want to know if Jim ratted or not, and they just beat him up and they take his address book. Then he manages to ring the doorbell, so the maid does come out and chase them all off, but they do take his address book, and they go to Jim's house. But when Plato goes into the house, he goes up to his room and he finds that he's actually gotten a letter from his dad, and he's like so ecstatic to open it, and he opens it and it's just a check and there's no message.
just money.
It just
Yeah.
says from. I think I might even just say like from parent. It doesn't even say like from dad. It's just like the most soulless attempt at parenting there is, and yeah, this crushes Plato, and then he realizes that he doesn't have his dress book on him and they've taken it. So he takes the gun that he used earlier to kill Pluto.
Kill
And
puppies.
yeah,
Puppies.
yeah.
Puppies.
Come
I
on,
can't get
Nicholas
past
Ray.
that, man. I
Fuck,
can't
man.
get past that.
Fuck, man. Pick anything else.
Anything else?
Anything else. But yeah, he takes the gun and he runs out the front door to go and protect his friend. And yeah, the lads get to Jim's house and they're banging on his door until the parents come down. And they've a chicken hung from the porch, which is a bit of a jump scare for the father. And they're asking him where his son is. And for whatever reason, whenever the car came in earlier in the night, Jim's parents assumed that was him coming home to bed, and he just didn't speak to them when he came in. But when they've come looking for him, they realize that he's not home, and it's really late, and they're worried. And they go looking for him. They go looking out in the back, and in the back garden, Plato's there waiting, and he's like, "Have you seen Jim?" And the father's like, "No, have you seen him?" And Plato kind of takes a minute, and he realizes the one safe place that Jim could have gone to is that old abandoned mansion he told him about that nobody else seems to know about. So Plato heads off towards the mansion, and in said mansion, this is great crack. This is basically
Yeah.
the angsty, moody, depressed equivalent to Ferris Bueller's Day Off,
Yeah.
where they break into a dingy old, broken down mansion, and they let Plato in as well. Then. And Plato pretends to be an estate agent who's shown a newlywed couple around, and they're making all these jokes about how much money they make and their kids and everything, and how their parents, and they hang out in the pool. Again, just like essential fucking teen angsty stuff.
Yeah.
It's great. I love this film, and I think partially because like the first time I watched it, I was like 15, and I was like, "Fuck, this is amazing."
Probably, yeah.
But I still love it, and yeah, they hang around the pool or whatever, and as well, you can tell that they're clearly like going through some sort of shock, because like all three characters are like a little bit delirious for the rest of the film. Like the events of what have happened with Buzz, they're all like slightly unhinged versions of their characters for the rest of the film, and they're just like making weird jokes and stuff. But
Yeah, it's
sorry,
the
go
most
ahead.
humorous aspect of the film, but also they are kind of like they do settle down a bit, and then they're kind of like confiding each other about their parents and how shitty their whole parents and stuff
Yeah,
like that. And then they ask Plato, and he's like, my dad died, which isn't true. Like, he's told about 5 different stories about his father at this point.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So obviously he just can't deal with the fact that his dad is like abandoned him and his mother is
Walked
off
out on him.
doing whatever, no, what
Yeah,
God knows what else. So yeah, as we said, they all have like their own kind of parental issues, to varying degrees. But yeah, like that's another little insight into it, because like he does kind of treat Jim as his father in a way, like a father kind of figure, even though
yeah,
he's
yeah,
the
yeah.
same age as him. So there is like an interesting dynamic going on in this scene where Judy and Jim are almost he
Like
almost
surrogate parents to him.
surrogate parents, exactly, yeah, what I was gonna say. Like they seem to almost like assume or be happy to assume that role as well, because it's like, right,
Yeah,
well,
because they also come from fucked up backgrounds
yeah,
with
so it's
their
like,
own
right,
parents,
if
where they're happy to basically play the happy
yeah,
parents.
it's like, right, I'll play the role I wish my mother did in Judy's case, and I'll play the
Yeah,
role I wish my father did in Jim's case. And look, at least we
yeah, I
can
think it's genius.
yeah, it's really effective stuff. And like the teen angst stuff, like there's other issues I have with the film, but the teen angst stuff, especially from kind of the cliff top scene, the chicken run scene onwards, is well done. It's very well done.
Yeah, and just absolutely knackered from the day that he's had. Plato does just kind of pass out then, and it's funny as well. Judy and Jim just start slagging him because he's got two odd socks, and they're like, "Oh, he obviously had a stressful morning." It's like it's a really intelligent way of just highlighting that, like, even the stuff that we don't see that's going on in their lives is like really stressful and not nice. Because like you wouldn't even think that, because like you didn't see him in the morning, but it's like, oh, he had a stressful morning. He's got two different colored socks on. But yeah, it's really clever. And they then go inside to where Jim lights a bit of a fire because he's asleep outside, and they get to talking. But when Plato wakes up, the lads, Buzz's friends, were all looking for him, and they've found him, and they're stood over him in this backyard of this mansion, and they chase him around the pool, and they've got like chains and stuff that they're threatening him with. And yeah, Dennis Hopper actually does like a dive off a diving board. It was pretty cool. But yeah, they chase Plato around, and Plato runs into the house, and he's trying to hide. He doesn't want any trouble. He hides under the table in the hallway, and he's petrified. And then the main lad, runs down the stairs, and he tries to attack Plato, and Plato just pulls the gun on him and fucking shoots him. Oh my god. Yeah.
At least it's
It,
self defense for a human being this time who actually
yeah,
wants to hurt him.
it's self defense. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
not defenseless puppies. But
yeah,
yeah. Pulls the gun on him in self defense, and then when the gunshot goes off, Jim bursts into the room. He's like, what the fuck? And Plato turns around with the gun and shoots at Jim, not knowing who he is, and Jim ducks. And he's like, oh, I'm so sorry, I thought you were someone else, I'm so scared, or whatever. And it's like, oh no, it's okay. Just tell me what happened. And then yeah, all hell basically starts breaking loose because the police who are looking for Jim's car track it to outside the house. So then they try to enter, and they startle Plato, who shoots at them and does a runner, and he just legs it out of the house. And the house isn't that far from the planetarium,
yeah.
so he starts running towards the planetarium, shooting behind him at the police, and the police are chasing him. And Jim and Judy are then chasing them, and with this whole chase scene, and again, probably for me the best bit of the second best bit of acting that James Dean does in this film is when they get to the planetarium, and Jim and Judy are hiding in the bushes whilst the policemen are trying to like form a ring around the entrance to the planetarium where Plato's hiding. Is she's like, oh my god, like why did he do it? Why is he snapped? And Jim's like, because he's just looking for, he's looking for someone to look up to. He's looking for, and he can't like get the words out, but he's basically trying to say like parents.
Yeah.
And then he basically realizes in this moment, it's such a great bit of acting. He realizes, one, that Plato actually does like look up to him like as a father figure, and two, the sort of underlying meaning of this, coming back to the scene in Ray's office at the beginning, the whole character arc basically for Jim is that, how am I supposed to grow up if I've no one to idolize, like
Yeah.
I'm just going to become a fuck up. And he realizes here that he actually has managed to become a person of like note, or a person worth respecting, irregardless of his parents. And he realizes, oh shit, I kind of am the man. Like I can take charge of this situation. So then he goes in, and as he's going towards the entrance of the planetarium, Ray, who has Jim's parents in the back of his car, shows up because they're out searching for Jim, and more police show up, and the maid shows up as well because news is broken out that there's a kid on the loose with a gun, and obviously
She
she saw
knows,
him
yeah.
leg it out the front door with a gun, so she gets there as well, and yeah, they all get there to be a big audience for Jim running into the planetarium to basically try and talk Plato off the ledge.
Yeah, exactly. So Plato was initially resistant to reveal himself, and it's shot really well. Like, you don't know where Plato is, what he's thinking,
Yeah,
how erratic he is or isn't. So it's like, is he gonna just start shooting out of panic, or because he thinks he's a defenseless puppy, or who the fuck knows at this stage? So, but he assures Plato that, look, it's all kind of gonna be okay, and you feel abandoned, but he does eventually. Plato does eventually kind of reveal himself, and then yeah, he does kind of act like a father figure. So he eventually hands him the gun,
yeah, he hands him the gun, and Jim
takes
takes
the
the
bullets out.
magazine out
Yeah,
and slips it into his belt. And he's like, "Oh, you promised you'd give me back." And he's like, "Oh yeah, yeah, come on ahead." And Plato's kind of reserved, and he's like, "Right here, I'll give you the gun, but come on ahead." So he gives him back the empty gun,
yeah,
and they start walking towards the exit down of the planetarium towards the police. And he's told them that his friends are outside waiting for him as well.
yeah. So obviously they get outside, and Plato is still acting kind of erratic and nervous, and
Yeah, he hates the bright lights that the
yeah,
police have like flashing on the entrance.
yeah, he's like, tell him to turn the lights off. So Jim calls out, turn off the lights, and Ray tells him to turn off the lights. But yeah, once they get outside, then they couple of lights are turned back on, and Plato again just starts acting erratically. This amazing scene then of Jim saying, I have the bullets, but they just see a gun, and what do cops do when they see a gun? Yeah, we all know. So
Yeah,
they
no,
open fire.
that line delivery, "I got the bullets," is the best part of this film. It's
Like,
fucking amazing.
have you seen The Sopranos?
I actually haven't.
Right, so there's this Christopher Moltisanti who's like Tony Soprano's nephew, and he's a mobster as well. So it's kind of played for laughs at this initial character arc, right? So what I'm getting at here is the reason I know this scene and why it's so famous is because in that show, Christopher starts taking acting lessons, and again, it's played for laughs at the start because it's like, right, a mobster but wants to become an actor. That's weird. But then as the storyline goes on, and we see Christopher in acting class, and he's actually not that bad. Like, he's not that bad of an actor. And then eventually they start doing this performance, and he's playing James Dean in Rebel Without a Cause.
Right, okay.
And he plays this scene, and it's genuinely unbelievable stuff from Michael Imperioli. He's channeling James Dean, but then the character of Christopher has his own father issues. His father died when he was young. So I was like, it's genuinely heartbreaking stuff. And like, that scene kind of introduced me to why and how effective and how kind of famous this scene is, this whole line delivery. Amazing stuff from Michael Imperioli. Like, anyone who watching The Sopranos, like, it's unbelievably heart-rending stuff, that scene, once you get to it, because the journey it takes you on. But it's also similar, like, obviously it's because this scene is so famous, and he's very much channeling James Dean's energy in this scene. Like, James Dean, as much as I think he probably overplays a few moments here and there throughout the film, he fucking knocks this out of the park. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's amazing. And yeah, the maid comes over and finds him dead and says that he had no one else in his life. And she actually gives him her necklace. And James Dean, who's obviously given him his jacket as well, which is a callback to the beginning of the film, zips the jacket up as well. Basically to signify that he actually did have one person. But it's also kind of like a body bag.
Yeah.
Like the zipping of a body bag. And his father, who had actually run across the fire in line to get to his son because he thought it was his son because of the jacket, picks his son up and basically walks his son away. And that's it. That's the end of
his dad finally starts to act like a parent would act in that situation.
Yeah, exactly. He's got a bit of backbone finally.
Yeah, so
And yeah, that's Rebel Without a Cause. For me, one of the greatest teen angst movies ever made. I think James Dean is phenomenal. I Got the Bullets, like, sends shivers down my spine every time. I think the dialogue is good. I just love that the arcs that the characters go on. I think they're fantastic. And yeah, it's genuinely one of my favorite films of the 50s. Definitely one of my favorite teen films ever made. I give it 4.5 stars. I think this is an absolute masterpiece. And yeah, one of the most important teen films ever made, in my opinion. What about you?
Yeah, it's definitely very, very influential, famous. Obviously, the fact that it was released a month after James Dean's death, like people were kind of proclaiming this guy's the next Marlon Brando, the next Montgomery Clift, etc., etc. So like, you could really tell if this is the only James Dean film I've seen up to date, and you could really tell the potential he had, and like he absolutely would have gone on to have an amazing career. So I can understand why it's so famous, and like I did enjoy the film. Like I said though, I don't know the fact that like a puppy murderer. You want me to identify with a puppy murderer? Come on, like you're climbing.
Yeah, that's why it's 4.5. That's why it's not 5. Okay.
You're facing an uphill battle. I'm sorry, like I just, what do you expect me to do there? Like, come on.
Yeah.
Also, like the teen angst stuff really did get me. I think the three performances are all very good, especially James Dean and Natalie Wood. But I do think, like I mentioned at the start of the film, I do think the fact that James Dean's death, but also Natalie Wood's death and Sal Mineo's deaths, they're probably because they were taken way too early. I do think that probably has a little bit to do as well with the film's kind of reputation, and like unfortunately, I wish that wasn't true. I wish they had obviously lived long lives and successful careers and everything like that. But leaving all that aside, leaving their untimely deaths aside and all that stuff, I think it's an effective teen drama. I think there's a couple of cracking scenes. Like I said, both scenes with Buzz versus Jim are really great.
Mm-hmm.
The ending is like really, really memorable. But again, I don't know. I didn't connect with it as much as I thought I would for some reason. Maybe if I'd have seen it when I was younger, when I was a teenager or whatever, maybe it would hold a bigger place in my heart. Similar to It's a Wonderful Life, I guess, where it's like if you watch it at a certain point in time, you might connect with it more. But like I can see it going up on a rewatch, but I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. I enjoyed it. I would recommend it. For some reason, though, it just didn't connect with me as much as I thought it would.
And yeah, that's Rebel Without a Cause. And our fourth of 5 films in our Through the Years arc. Shane, what is the final film of the month?
The final film of the month is the Spy Who Came In From the Cold. I know I was about to say The Man Who Came In From the Cold there. The Spy Who Came In From the Cold, which is a pretty incredible espionage thriller. I don't think we've done an espionage thriller on the podcast, have we? I don't think we have. So this is from...
Would you consider Saboteur?
I guess, yeah, actually, I suppose, yeah. Saboteur and maybe Foreign Correspondent. Some maybe we have. But, yeah, I suppose from that point of view, that's fair. But I think this is based on the John le Carré novel of the same name. And again, John le Carré is like the guy when it comes to espionage and all that stuff. The guy's amazing. I've read a few of his novels and seen a bunch of his adaptations across film and TV. And I was pretty much, well, get into it next week, but I really enjoy it. I don't think you've seen it, have you?
I have not seen it yet. As of recording, even I've not seen it.
So I love the dynamic because it's not as loud and as kind of boisterous, if you want to call it that, as kind of thrillers, espionage thrillers usually are. So we'll get into it next week, but I really, really enjoy it, and I think it's just a different change of pace. Like it's been a long time since Saboteur or Foreign Correspondent. So I think it's a nice little change of pace since those films. So it's a nice little change of pace compared to what we've been doing on the podcast recently. So I think it'd be a nice little, like you said, a nice little change of pace.
Yeah, lovely. And I can't wait to cover it. I can't wait to see it for the first time as well. But in the meantime, if you can leave a like on the video, that would be amazing. Comment as well. Share this podcast with anyone you know who might be interested. And thank you very much. I've been Harry Bailey.
I've been Shane Mahoney.
And we will see you all next week for The Spy Who Came In From the Cold. See you then. Thanks.